The hearing will come to order. Welcome to the Committee on the Budget's hearing regarding the President's fiscal year 2024 budget request. Today, we're delighted to have Director of the Office of Management and Budget, the Honorable Shalonda Young, with us. Welcome. I appreciate your reaching out to me and starting this business relationship and your good faith efforts to work with me and my colleagues on the Republican side of the aisle. And today we get the opportunity to unpack and understand the President's vision for this country, and as he says, the values and principles that he believes are best to guide our nation forward. With that, I want to yield myself such time as I may consume for my opening statement. Over the last 2 years, this administration's reckless spending and failed economic policies have resulted in continued record inflation, soaring interest rates, and an economy in a recessionary tailspin with the prospect of a catastrophic, and I would say irreparable, debt crisis looming over the horizon. 2 years. 2 years under this president, $10 trillion in spending, $6 trillion of which has been added to the national debt, all of which has ignited a cost of living crisis for working families who are struggling to survive. Taxing our job creators back to their knees as they try to get back on their feet after a nationwide shutdown. Paying people more to stay home than to go back to work, and waiving work requirements for able-bodied adults, trapping a whole new generation of Americans in poverty and government dependence. Weaponizing, and this is personal for me, being from West Texas, the energy capital of the world. Weaponizing a whole-of-government assault on American energy, the lifeblood of our great economy, a cornerstone of our national security, and the blessing of affordable electricity and gas for families across the country. This administration, I believe, has sown the wind of disastrous economic policies, and the American people are reaping the whirlwind of its cruel consequences. No one can look at our nation's balance sheet or CBO's economic outlook and not shudder to their core at the rapid deterioration of our nation's financial health and our unsustainable spending and debt trajectory. On March 9th, the President had the opportunity to recognize this sober and grim economic reality, reverse course, and show the American people that he understood the painful results of his failed policies. Instead, President Biden doubled down on his reckless spending, radical policies, and the woke and bloated bureaucracy that is bankrupting our nation. The President's budget proposes the highest sustained levels of taxes, spending, and deficits in the history of the United States. In the middle of a spending-induced inflation crisis that is crushing working Americans, the President's budget proposes $82 trillion in spending over 10 years, a spending per GDP that is 18% over the 50-year average and is the equivalent of $100,000 per family of four. $2.5 trillion in increase in the auto spend of mandatory spending, nearly $100 billion in requests or proposals in discretionary spending year over year, a 6% increase over this year for FY24 in discretionary spending. As job creators try to get back on their feet and our economy plummets into a recession, CBO projects that the GDP growth for next year will be a meager 0.1%. As this happens to the greatest economy in the world, and to our families and to our family-owned small businesses, the President levies $4.7 trillion in new taxes on virtually everyone. Small businesses will lose the 20% deduction tax hike. Families will lose marginal rates where they were able to keep, after Republican tax reform, $2,000 more of their hard-earned money in their pockets, in their savings accounts. Tax hike. Doubling the death tax on farmers and ranchers who work hard to give us food security. They pay taxes, federal income, state income, property tax, sales tax. Now, twice the pain of this, what I believe is an unfair, un-American tax and the death tax. Nearly $40 billion in new taxes on American energy producers, which will only drive energy prices further up and penalize folks at the lower economic spectrum who are having a difficult time heating and this summer cooling their homes. And obviously, with energy independence, that will be jeopardized with more taxes passed on to consumers, and less investment, and less domestic energy production, and more dependence on foreign sources. And then finally, the highest rate of corporate taxes in the developed world. We will go back to having a higher corporate tax rate than communist China, so we can wave goodbye to America's competitiveness, say goodbye to the trillions that flowed back to our country, back to our manufacturing, creating more jobs and more opportunity and more prosperity, where all boats rose on the tide of the results of lower tax burden, lower regulatory burden when Republicans had control of Congress. By the way, when I say all boats rose on that tide, 6 million people were lifted out of poverty, the lowest poverty rate in the history. And what will Americans get for this unprecedented expansion and reimagination of the people's government? They're going to get more inflation, more shrinking paychecks, more skyrocketing prices at the grocery store and gas pump, soaring interest rates, more labor shortages, more of a culture of dependency, and overall a weaker economy and a more vulnerable nation. Are we going to get more safety and security for our nation? Nope. More economic freedom and prosperity? Nope. Greater access and lower cost of health care? No. Stronger and more resilient real infrastructure? In sum, are we doing our job as lawmakers of the greatest country in the world, as stewards of taxpayer resources, as fiduciaries of our children's future? Are we giving our children a safer, stronger, freer America? Not even close, in my estimation. Not even close. What I believe we're getting is more wasteful, woke, and bloated bureaucracy, a 20% increase in EPA. And we're asking for more spending. We're in an inflation crisis, and we're asking for 2,400 new climate activists disguised as EPA employees. We're going to get more infiltration of leftist ideology through divisive, in my opinion, divisive politicization of race and sexuality. Not running a better government, not running a more accountable government. The list is long. I'll spare you. But I agree with the president, Madam Director. I agree that budgets aren't just numbers on a balance sheet. They are a set of values and principles. And based on the president's most recent budget, it's clear to me that he values, and this administration values, a bigger, more radical, and more powerful federal government over the freedom, safety, and economic security of his fellow Americans.